Kirk Cameron is right. Well, not Kirk Cameron. Ray Comfort is right. That didn't come out right. Ray Comfort is right in places. Some of you know that Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron are republishing On the Origin of Species with a 50-page introduction by them in commemoration of the book's 150th anniversary. Don't scoff, they're right. At least in the part that I read. The very beginning. It begins like this. Consider for a moment whether you could ever believe this publication happened by accident. Here's the argument. There was nothing. Then paper appeared, and ink fell from nowhere onto the flat sheets and shaped themselves into perfectly formed letters of the English alphabet. Initially, the letter said something like this, which you'll notice has two derogatory terms for Kirk Cameron embedded in it. As you can see, random letters rarely produce words that make sense. But in time, mindless chance formed them into the order of meaningful words with spaces in between them. Periods, commas, capitals, italics, quotes, paragraphs, margins, etc. also came into being in their correct placement. The sentences then grouped themselves to relate to each other, giving them coherence. Page numbers fell into sequence in the right places. Headers, footers, and footnotes appeared from nowhere on the pages, matching the portions of text to which they related. The paper trimmed itself and bound itself into a Bible. Book. That should be book. This publication isn't a Bible. The ink for the cover fell from different places, being careful not to incorrectly mingle with the other colors, forming itself into the graphics and title. This is all true. Yeah, I get that he thinks this is ridiculous, but I don't really give a shit about him or interpreting him correctly, and I didn't bother to read the rest of the introduction. The process he describes is how books came to be. Now, he left out a lot of details. Perhaps for humor's sake or hyperbole. I refuse to believe that he'd rather ignore huge bits of history, like verbal language came first, so instead of written words randomly forming, it was verbal words that randomly formed. I'm sure that he knows that. Now, I know that you naysayers out there already dismiss what he wrote, but he's right. So for your sake, I'm going to fill in the gaps. In the beginning, there was nothing. No books, no words, no language. Just a guy that was too short to reach a stick. Then a tall guy came along, and the short guy had to figure out a way to get him to get in the stick. Nothing worked, and he was frustrated because communication had not yet been randomly formed. So in the spirit of randomness, he randomly shouted, "Jabba wabba snip snap doobily, get me a stick, beep beep." The tall guy didn't know what that meant because it was random. But he saw the short guy trying to get the stick earlier, so he reached up and got it for him. A year passed by, and the short guy needed another stick, so he went to find the tall guy. It had been a year, and he forgot exactly what he said. So he said, "Doobity, doobity, give me a stick, beep, give me a stick, give me a stick." And the tall guy went and got a stick. And from then on, whenever the short guy said, "Give me a stick," the tall guy remembered and went and got him a fucking stick. Others see this, and pretty soon everybody is shouting random syllables at each other, trying to get them to do things. There's nothing special about the mindless random syllables that people shout. It's just sometimes it works, people get what they want, and sometimes it doesn't. The ones that work get repeated. Just like the short guy's "get me a stick." Pretty soon people are giving each other more than one instruction at a time. Complex instructions. And pretty soon after that, people are shouting these once random syllables at each other in specific orders out of habit. And after a long while, when language is pretty standardized, and the short guy is rich and famous and living in Hollywood because he invented language, he finds himself in need of a stick. He tries, but he can't shout loud enough for the tall guy to hear from thousands of miles away. So then well, that's a long story. Long story short, he invents writing and writes a letter, and the tall guy brings him a stick. Sometime after that, a guy wrote a really long letter called a book that described a similar process to how language came about, but instead describes how life came about. And 150 years after that, some dipshit decided to republish that book with an introduction. And at the beginning of that introduction, it, though hyperbolically, correctly described how, through mindless, random chance, that book came to be. And that's how the book came to be.